Hello and welcome again to another episode of All Things Real Estate. And again, you're with your host, Kyle Seyboth with Keller Williams Realty. And I thank you all for watching as usual. Today, we have a very special guest. We have a friend, colleague, investor, person that I work with all the time. We have Andrew Cotton of Blackstone Leasing and Management, also Rhode Island Property Wire. Andy does a lot of flipping of properties, does a lot of investing, a lot of wholesaling. He really kind of does everything real estate. That's why he's a great guest for All Things Real Estate. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, appreciate it for having me. Happy to be here.
No problem. So Andy, let's just kind of get right into it today. So Andy works with, let's just start on your flipping side of the business, right?
Sure.
So Andy, you have a partner, right?
We do. Yep.
So Andy and his partner Shane, they work together, and let's just go into the history. When did you guys get started?
We met through a mutual friend in 2013.
Okay.
Each of us kind of had our own businesses before that, and we offset each other quite a bit personality-wise and professionally, so made sense to link up, and things work really well.
So Andy is a professional flipper. So what does that mean? So Andy, explain to me like I'm 5 years old, what is a flip? What does that mean? When I say Andy is a professional flipper or Andy is an investor that flips, what does that mean? What do you do?
So I'll take a little step back. The way I like to explain what we do is we are experts at recognizing value in real estate where other people don't see it. So there's two real components to value in flipping real estate. Number one is buying the value out of the gate, right? Seeing something that other people don't see value in and buying it cheaply. The second step is being able to perform any renovation work for less than what the perceived value of that work is, and you combine them both and you get your profit flipping. So we obviously have access to buy these properties before most people get a chance to see them. We buy equity there, and then we perform more equity in our ability to get through a renovation project for less than what most people have to pay to do it, and the two of them combined equals our profit.
So simplistically, Andy goes and buys a property. So you buy 123 Main Street, right?
Yep.
You pay $100,000 for that property,
Okay.
right? Now you go and put $50,000 into the property, right? So now you're in it for $150,000,
Correct.
right? Your goal is to sell it for more than $150,000 plus whatever you want to profit, right? So let's say your ideal profit is 10, 20, 30%. You add that on top of that 150, and that's the number you look to sell it for, pretty much, right?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. I think we've had a tendency to look at it almost in reverse, where there's a bunch of fixed numbers in the business, and what you're solving for is how much you can pay, right? That's the key. The whole thing is what's the maximum I can pay so I can beat out other competitors when we're buying these assets and still make my profit. That's the way to look at it. So
that's interesting. So
you find a house.
You actually back into it, right?
We back into it because
which is smart.
It's what we've learned over years of doing this.
Smart.
We started the first way of adding it all up, and then there's our number. And what you find is you're really jockeying to sell these things at either over market value, or you're trying to convince yourself there's value where there's not. So you have to solve for the variable, and the variable is what can I pay? So what we do is, in that exact example, I'll look at that house, I'll comp it out. I don't believe, this is me not being a realtor here, right? Kyle's the realtor, but I don't thoroughly believe in comps like realtors do. I feel like there's a lot of precedent for being able to create comps in certain areas.
Right.
Part of what makes us successful is we're so tapped into our market that we fully understand street by street, corner by corner, what we can sell things for. And the comps may not support that, but we don't really care because we know we can do it. And consistently, we're doing that. Just because of how, so being an expert at the area is critically important. You can't be an armchair CEO. You have to be out there and you got to know these regions. So what we do is we have a house, we come up with the price, let's call it retail value after rehab, 250 grand. We subtract holding costs, which roundabout after realtors, taxes, water, sewer, electric, gas, insurance, roundabout 11%, and start to work backwards. Cost of rehab,
that's great.
profit.
So one thing you said that I picked up on was you have to be an expert in your area, right?
Yeah.
I'll take that a step further and say that for you guys, you're an expert in the entire state. And the beauty of that is you basically go from Woonsocket to Westerly and anything in between. You've either flipped something there, you either held something there, or you've either looked at something in some of those areas, right?
Correct.
So that gives you an additional advantage because there could be deals in Westerly that some people from the Woonsocket or from the Providence area won't go towards, and then you guys can go ahead and get those deals.
Yeah, you really have to be a deal junkie. I mean,
you do.
We live and breathe this stuff 7 days a week. I mean, on my weekends, I'm looking at open houses, trying to analyze what other folks have done and what properties are going for. You have to get bit by the bug to really do this right.
I guess anything, you have to love it. If you don't love it and you don't breathe it, sleep, whatever, eat it, sleep, drink it, whatever they say, like if you don't do that, you really can never be an expert.
Therein lies the difference between a job and a career.
Correct.
This isn't a job for us. This is our careers.
Correct.
But I want to take a step back to that. Rhode Island happens to be a really small state. So
very small.
Having our market be the entire state and part of Massachusetts is really equatable to a region in another state.
Right.
So it just so happens you can drive across our state in 30 minutes.
Right.
So it's
that's something like, so in
perspective.
in Massachusetts, obviously you can only focus on a certain area.
Yeah.
Right. You can't do the entire state of Mass.
We have a lot of similarities across the whole state. I mean, there's different markets within the state, but generally speaking, it's all a tertiary market. It all reacts similarly. Supply and demand is similar versus a big state where you may have 3 or 4 different main cities. Each city has its own identity, and the tertiary markets respond differently.
Right.
So you have to be kind of mindful of that. Rhode Island is a little bit more simple for us. Everything kind of reacts in a similar fashion. So for us, it's really one market.
So 2 other follow-up questions. So number 1, on average, how many flips would you say that you and your partner do per year?
Ooh, that's a tough question because, again, everything in real estate is a challenge to get down to the root of that. So flipping, if you're looking at it on a retail side, which is similar to the explanation we just had, without getting into nitty-gritty details, 60, 70 a year maybe of retail. We do a lot of wholesaling where stuff that we don't think we can make our profit on by going through our process because we have a large business. We've got a lot of employees, fleet vehicles, offices. It's expensive to run our operation. So we need to make more gross profit than most folks in order to have a net return. So we wholesale a lot of projects to other smaller investors who don't carry around our overhead. They can make money, we can't. We'll make a couple of bucks, wholesale it to them, let them run with it. So if you really factor all that in, we're in the 100 to 150 a year range in terms of, again, I haven't looked at my numbers in terms of
property actually changing hands. So when you say retail, right? So to explain that to everyone, so what that means is he buys it, renovates it, and sells it on the open market, right? List it on the market, sell it to the regular retail buyer.
By the way.
Through me, that I usually sell them, right? So we renovate it, we put it on the market, and then we let the general public go out there and try to acquire the asset.
Yeah, so there's retail would be a house exactly like that. We are selling to somebody with the intention of them living in the property as a primary residence.
Right.
Mainly commodity homes. We're not doing luxury, oceanside living or log cabins. These are main homes for families.
Right. Your typical is like 300 and below. I would say your average is
it's really like, I would say 250 to 375 is our sweet spot. So a lot of first-time home buyer stuff, just bread and butter homes.
Stuff that exactly like you said, first-time buyers. Because as an investor, right, the worst thing you want to deal with, and this is from dealing with the higher-end kind of investors and people that do stuff on the higher-end flips, is that buyer that needs to sell a house to buy your house, right? Yeah. Because now there's so many dominoes in place, right? So for you guys, it's nice because your buyer doesn't own anything already. They rent, right? They either sold their house, they rent, they live in a condo, whatever that looks like, they can just transition into a simple closing. So 45 to 60-day close. Now you go to that 4 to 600, 4 to 800 market, those people own other houses.
You just deal with a whole slew of different problems.
Totally
exactly
different.
Like that. You're dealing with a lot of Hubbard clauses, which is what you just mentioned. The first-time home buyer people, you don't have those issues, but you have other issues.
Correct. It's a different set of problems.
It's a different set of issues. Correct. So you really have to, and this is why we've worked so well with Kyle over the years, is that he's been really good identifying the marketplace, right? Correct. We're selling these things retail. There's a specific market for each classification of property, and you have to both market to that market, but you also have to be able to handle a closing to that marketplace. That's a whole separate deal. That's what separates realtors is everybody can, well, most people can get a house in contract.
Right.
Can you get it to close?
Can you get it to close, and can you deal with the nuances of a first-time buyer and then a savvy investor?
Right.
Those two things never line. They don't
And
line up.
everybody in between.
Right, and then you have all the moms, the grandparents, all the buyers, ancillary people involved, the lawyers, the
It's
appraisers.
a very emotional decision
Right.
for a lot of folks, and I fully respect and we honor that.
But this is
you
your
have
business.
to be prepared for that.
But this is your business. You
Exactly.
have to run a business. I have to be that middle person to kind of be the liaison between you, the buyer, and everybody else in between, and keep everyone calm.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part in this business, is that middle end, that whole middle piece.
Although I will say, it is easier for an investor such as ourselves, a flipper investor, and a retail buyer to work together with you than it is for two retail people, because two sets of emotions that are offsetting
Correct. That's even worse.
are difficult. We are business oriented. We understand the emotional
Correct.
side, so we generally speaking have a much easier pathway to closing deals.
Your deals either are gonna get to the finish line or they're gonna die.
Yep.
Right? The emotional owner and the emotional buyer, there's gonna be a lot of ups and downs in between that.
And you might have a good deal with a seller that wants to sell, a buyer that wants to buy, but
Right.
some egos get involved and the thing
Right.
never gets to the closing table.
Right.
There's no egos in business, so we do this to close deals.
It's to close. The other thing you talked about that you guys do is wholesaling.
Correct.
Right? So that is the process of getting a property that has value, right? So buying that 123 Main Street for 100 and saying, hey, we're too busy, the profit margin doesn't make sense, the location's too far from my crew, I need to sell this property for a profit to another investor that can go and flip it. So on those, you look for a lesser profit, but what you do is the same process, right? You're taking an asset and you're transferring it to a new buyer.
Correct.
But you're not flipping, you're not doing any work.
So going back to our original explanation of there's two components to retail flipping, right? There's buying equity and there's performing equity, right? That's the retail side. A wholesaling is the exact same thing without the second piece. We're buying value, we're buying equity, and we are not honoring the performance. We're not renovating the property. We're passing that profit to somebody else. We're buying our equity, selling it, let them make their money on the rehab side.
And that kind of keeps everything flowing too, because that keeps those investors that buy from wholesale from you, it keeps them coming back, right?
Yep.
It keeps them asking you if you have any projects that you don't want to do, and it allows you to unload inventory that's sitting. Right?
Sure.
If you have a lot of inventory that's stale, this allows you to get rid of that.
And there's a lot of reasons why people buy wholesales, right? Because not everybody operates with our mantra, with our mindset in our markets, with our expense loads, right? So we can sell a property that we can't make money on to somebody who can make a great profit on.
Right.
And so in most circumstances, when you're selling a commodity item, if you're selling at a high price, somebody else is getting a hit, right? This is a business where both people can win.
Right.
And everywhere has to work that way.
Right, and in this market, I think now more than ever, supply is so low that these wholesale deals, they sell so fast because people that don't have the connections that you have, that don't have the budget that you have, that don't have the capacity and wherewithal that you have, they can't find the properties. So they need to come to you. They need to come to other people that have these wholesale deals.
It's need but want, because in order to break down the walls in the industry and get the connections we've gotten for however many years we've been doing this, it takes a massive amount of work.
Right.
And a lot of staff and a lot of capital. So for some business plans, it doesn't make sense. There's no money in that for them. So they would rather just let us do what we do and make our money.
Right.
And they do what they do and make their money. It's like any other supply chain business where you identify your piece of the supply chain and you optimize it and make your money there without trying to corner the entire supply chain and blow everybody out.
Right. So let's take this to a different, I don't usually do this, but I want to do this with you. Let's say to the followers or viewers or listeners or whatever, if someone wanted to get started in this business, what would be the biggest pieces of advice you would give to them?
I mean,
starting out with, first of all, how much capital do I need? And then what advice would you give me?
Number one, get a mentor. A real mentor.
Say that again, get a what?
Get a mentor.
Get a mentor, okay.
A real one, like not one that's a professional mentor for a fee, one that actually does the work and has a resume that you can see that they consistently do business successfully. There's a lot of mentors out there who are shopping their services at a fee, and when you look at their resume, it's really not very impressive. But find somebody that does this business and offer to help them for free on a deal or two. Just get in the door and learn the ropes. That's the most important thing you could do.
So get a mentor, but don't find one that wants something from you in the sense that they want money, right? Because I think that's important. A lot of these mentors out there, a lot of these programs, they want you to pay a fee, right? And these folks aren't going to give you any more value than someone in the real world doing it. They're actually going to give you less value.
It's horrible. I've actually spent so much time mentoring young investors and spending extra time trying to break them away from these lessons that they've learned.
Yeah,
the lessons they've learned by all these, the radio show and the commercial ads and all these things about learning how to flip houses. We have to break away all that because it's inaccurate and disingenuous. So it's actually taking. I would have rather had them as students before.
Yeah, know nothing.
Yeah,
you want to catch someone who knows nothing.
They got bad habits at that point, and it's tough.
Because that stuff is not transferable to anywhere in the U.S. Like that, those programs and models and training sessions.
It's antiquated.
Correct, that stuff, exactly. So number one, get a mentor. Number two, I want to do my first flip. How much capital do I need?
I guess that all depends on your market, right? And
in Rhode Island,
the best thing to do is have all the capital available, right? That's ideal. Not realistic for a lot of folks, but ideal scenario.
I have 50 grand. Can I flip my first house?
You can, but the stakes just got higher for you. You have to be a lot more careful than somebody who has 350 grand, because it's a simple leverage factor. Right. You can't absorb much. If you do a deal for 300 grand, right, and you're leveraged, whatever, 3x on that deal or 4x on that deal,
5.
Yeah, then your tolerance for a loss is negligible. You can't absorb much.
I think your point there is your first deal is so important. That first deal has to be you have to be so on point with your numbers.
Yeah.
If you're going to borrow private funding or what they call hard money, right? If you're going to borrow that, you have to factor those costs into your holding costs so that you're not taking a loss on that first transaction.
I got a secret for you. Even if you don't borrow hard money, you still need to factor those costs in, because if you're an investor, if you're a trader on Wall Street, or if you're a real estate investor, whatever your investment career is, you have what they call cost of capital.
Right.
That's a factor. Right. So if you have $1 million sitting in a checking account and you want to go put it to work investing in real estate, you could just take that $1 million and lend it to other people who are investing in real estate at 12% interest.
Right.
So for you to actually put that money into your own risk bucket, you have to essentially say that there is an opportunity cost of 12% on that money where you could have done nothing and lent it out to somebody else.
Right.
So that number is always a line item in your balance sheet, regardless of whether you're borrowing money or you're not.
Right, and that's a good call. So those people, right? So even if you were to give, let's say that person had 50,000 and they were like, I want to flip. I could get you with 50,000 a guaranteed 10%, right?
Yeah.
Guaranteed 10% on your money to lend to other real estate investors.
So really your profit is whatever is above
Above
that.
10%, right, exactly. You need to look at it from the standpoint, like, if I make more than 10%, the deal makes sense, but what number makes sense to me to take that risk? Because when I lend money to someone, the risk is really, as long as I know the property.
It's collateralized risk.
Correct. There's a collateral.
Minimal.
Right. So when I go in now, I own the property. I have to get the workers. I have to make sure I'm on a deadline. And I have to make sure I sell it at my price. There's a huge risk factor there.
Right.
Right. So take that risk, right? And you have to extrapolate that to a number above 10%.
It's risk and work. You have to do the work.
Right.
Or at least oversee the work, which in itself is work as project management.
Right.
So back to your original question, I think it's really important that we hammer this through. If somebody has $50,000 and they want to be a real estate investor, is it possible? Absolutely. Is it possible on less money? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. What's your best strategy? The answer is depends on risk. Mm-hmm. If 4 people were in a class that, or mentees of mine that I'm mentoring, and they each have $50,000, my recommendation was team up together, put 200 grand in an account, and learn it together. That way you're spreading your risk around a little bit. You're learning the ropes, because really this is your first 5 deals is tuition.
Correct.
Right. That's your education.
Correct.
So don't be so worried about making a killing on your first 5 deals. Be worried about learning. So you can do that with other folks to de-risk your situation and still keep your learning together.
And the value, so think about it like that, right? So you're learning. Any money you make on those first 5 deals is just icing on the cake.
Sure.
Because you've learned so much in those 5 transactions, because you've acquired, you've renovated, and you've retailed. You've done 3 steps on 5. That's 15 steps on 5 deals. Now you have a good understanding of what could go wrong. Yep. And there's still many other things that could go wrong, but at least you know, here's where I can mess up on the buy, here's where I can mess up on the renovation, and here's where my retail numbers are wrong.
And that will also help you develop your team.
Correct.
Who's your realtor?
Absolutely.
Kyle.
Right.
At least that's what we've decided.
Right.
Who's your lender? Who's your preferred contractor? Who's your lawyers? They're going to do the work. You need 5 or 6 deals under your belt to really decide who is going to perform and be a part of your team.
And another big piece is that first few deals, who are you relying on for your end values, right? Yeah. Where do you get your, so if I think the property's worth, because you and I could look at the same house and you say it's worth 200 and I say it's worth 150. Who do I trust?
Yeah.
Who as an investor, I don't know what to do now. I have 2 different values, 2 different people who know the market. I'm 50 grand apart. What do I do? Right? That becomes really tough.
Well, I think if, sometimes it's easier to draw these things out, and maybe that's a lesson for another day here, but that's where it makes a little more sense to, when you're looking at your first few deals, really have one word going in your mind and say commodity, commodity, commodity. Mm-hmm. That's the one you want to do. Do you want the 3-level house that's on the water with a view? No, because there's a very few amount of people that can buy that house,
right.
And that price could be all over the place if you happen to find the right buyer. If you have a raised ranch house in a neighborhood where there's 500 raised ranch houses and 15 of them just sold in the last 6 months, then that shouldn't ever be an issue. So when you're doing your first few houses, look at the most commodity assets, properties that are lower price point than most of the averages in your market.
Right.
Properties that are in neighborhoods where there's tons of other properties exactly like it that have sold, so you can really narrow down your risk into a commodity. So if you go to certain neighborhoods that we do pretty well in, Kyle's number might be 250, mine might be 255.
Right.
I mean, we're talking
we're close.
narrow
we're
margins.
Really close.
Yeah.
We're not ever really that far off because we know that it's
where we're far
commoditized.
off is like, hey, we're going to build a luxury condo somewhere. You think it might be worth 600, I'm thinking 800.
800, or that Barrington on the water where there's a huge spread.
Yeah, we thought it was worth 400. We sold it for 290.
Right, it's a big spread.
That's one of my only deals that I got burned on because it's not a commodity home. So starting out, think commodity home.
One last thing I'll say before we go into your outlook for 2020. What I say to my investors is this. Your first few deals, make sure, because it's going to take 6 to 8 months to finish and be on the market and sold and whatever. Make sure, if worst case scenario, the market totally swings and the pendulum goes from a seller's market to a buyer's market, right? That I can rent that property and be okay.
It's called multiple outs.
That is the great way to look at it. I need to have multiple outs. And what that means is if I don't sell it, I can rent it. So my credit, my commercial lending, whatever that looks like, I better have an exit strategy.
Yeah.
Or else now I have a hard money loan, I can't sell it and I can't rent it, and that's how foreclosures happen.
Yep.
In this world, right? So piece of advice, if you can't sell it, make sure you have another out, make sure there's a multiple outs, whether it's having a friend buy it, you buy it, refinancing it, whatever the heck that looks like, make sure that's there. So in the essence of time, last question, I've answered this multiple times on the show. Outlook for 2020, real estate market up or down, volume up or down, and prices up or down?
I think real estate market stable from a retail perspective, extremely difficult for an investor perspective. Low inventories, very hard to find assets. There's a lot of professional investors out there, but there's also a lot of new real estate investors out there who really don't, I wouldn't say don't know what they're doing, because they may, but they're learning, right? They don't have the discipline that the professionals do. Mm-hmm. And so many bids are out there that the cost on these properties are getting jacked up. So, I think this is a time for learning, and this is a time for doing a few deals and not be worried about thin margin. Yeah. Worried about get a couple under your belt, focus on de-risking and only working with commodity homes, build your team.
I agree.
Your team will be there. Good market, bad market, sideways market, doesn't matter.
I agree. I
Build
think
your team.
It's about the learning process and setting the foundation for when the market turns that you're ready to go. Yep. So I would agree with that 100%. Again, Andrew Cotton, Rhode Island Property Wire, investor, owner and manager of Blackstone Leasing Management, entrepreneur, investor of multiple multifamilies. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Appreciate being here.
We really appreciate it. We'll have this out there, and we look forward to all the viewers tuning in.
Awesome.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again, Kyle.
Appreciate it.
Been
no
fun.
problem.